Giant claws, massive teeth, bodies too big for their own good. Evolution is an amazing thing, but these 5 creatures took it too far. First up, a reptile that found out the hard way. About 60 million years ago, during the Paleocene era, the Titanoboa slithered through the jungles of Colombia as the apex predator of its environment. It's not hard to see why. Estimates put the Titanoboa's total length at up to 13 meters total. Not only that, the snake could weigh over a ton, making it a titan in more ways than one. For comparison, the green anaconda reaches half of that at about 6.3 meters in length and weighs 90 kilograms on the higher end scale. Anyone who's ever handled a green anaconda can say that they are freakishly strong and hard to move. When they wrap around you, there isn't much gonna pry them off of you. Swap out that anaconda for a Titanoboa, and you can see how these snakes manage to make animals the size and weight of cows their prey. So why on earth did the Titanoboa get to this size? Well, snakes are cold-blooded, meaning their bodies need a warm climate to keep themselves going. They love wet and warm environments. And back in the Paleocene, the Amazon was much hotter than it is today, with temperatures averaging in the low 30 degrees centigrade. With plenty of water around and heat to keep their blood running hot, the early snakes thrived in the Amazon. They became such top predators and enjoyed so much access to prey that they grew to absolutely absurd sizes, and so the Titanoboa came to be. But then the Earth got cooler, and everything started to fall apart. The Titanoboa had grown to such a monstrous size thanks to the heat and humidity that it not only couldn't bear a slight temperature drop, but its mobility meant it couldn't even migrate to somewhere warmer. The Titanoboa had hyper-specialized into being the king of the Amazon. When the game changed, its evolutionary path meant it didn't have the space to adapt. Luckily, there are still snakes about today that resemble the Titanoboa, so it's not like the whole species disappeared overnight. But some of the much older extinct creatures like the Anomalocaris barely have any resemblance to anything that lives today. If we go much further back in time, 500 million years ago to the middle of the Cambrian era, we find that Earth looked a lot different. There was no life on land at all. Every animal lived in the massive sea wrapped around the world. One species stood above the rest, and was quite possibly the first ever apex predator. The Anomalocaris had 2 large appendages coming out of its head that looked a lot like shrimp's antennae, but were actually raptorial arms. These let it scoop up prey as it glided over the sea floor thanks to the wiggling fins that lined the side of its body. Thanks to its large eyes, it would spot prey and bring them up to its circular plated mouth on the side of its head, which many scientists describe as a pineapple slice or donut-shaped jaw. Scientists believe the Anomalocaris preyed mostly on softer arthropods, sea worms, and jellyfish, as its mouth didn't have the force to break through anything hard-shelled. But with most organisms being soft-shelled, this made the Anomalocaris a big fish in a small pond. While the other species were still struggling to evolve, it tore through the ecosystem and found prey incredibly easily. With all this easy prey, it grew massive for its time. While most Cambrian species came in at only a dozen or so centimeters in length, the Anomalocaris could grow to be 60 centimeters long, dwarfing the competition. But the Anomalocaris' weak mouth would come back to haunt it. When many of the Cambrian life forms died to mass extinction events, the Anomalocaris basically lost all of its prey. The hardshell life forms survived, and they were too tough to feed on. Unable to adapt fast enough, this brought the end to the Anomalocaris. An early evolutionary advantage made it very complacent. When times changed, it had rooted itself too deep in its own comfort zone to adapt. But at least it has the comfort of knowing it wasn't the only species to fall into this trap. Let's head forward a little to about 300 million years ago. It's during this time we find the largest arthropod to have ever lived in Earth's history, the Arthropleura. Millipedes and centipedes today aren't very impressive when it comes to size. Even the largest species barely crack 30 centimeters and weigh pretty much nothing. Arthropods breathe in through their spirals and trachea, If there isn't much oxygen in the air, they can only absorb so much, so they can only grow so big. The early Arthropleura, however, had a very efficient respiratory system which allowed it to intake plenty of oxygen very easily. This allowed it to grow in size and still keep itself oxygenated. That's already good enough by itself, but when you add in the fact that the oxygen levels in the Earth's atmosphere skyrocketed 300 million years ago, you end up with an arthropod that was way bigger than it should have been. This created another snowball effect. The Arthropleura's natural predators would have easily scooped it up if it had remained small, but now that it was massive, with thick segmented armor plates to shield its body, there was no breaking through. Most animals would have left the peaceful giant alone and let it scour the forest floor for seed ferns and leaf litter. At its peak, the Arthropleura reached sizes that were just absurd. Imagine taking a millipede and making it over 7 times longer and much wider, then make it weigh 250 times more. The biggest Arthropleura fossils scientists have found measure 2.7 meters in length, making them about as long as a car, and they weighed up to a staggering 50 kilograms. Nature couldn't let this go on forever. Some scientists believe that as the Earth transitioned out of the Permian era, the super high levels of oxygen in the air began to fall. Though the Arthropleura had developed an efficient respiratory system, it had grown way too reliant on the oxygen-rich atmosphere over this period. An arthropod of this size just couldn't exist in these environments. The Arthropleura went extinct. But evolution doesn't just make mistakes on land. Mother Nature has had her fair share of mistakes in the sea as well. 13 million years ago, the oceans were full of sharks and baleen whales that were very middle of the road. They weren't small, but they weren't quite as big as they are today. Blubbery but manageable. The Livyatan, an early form of sperm whale, loved this. Deep sea sperm whales use their sonar bumps to echolocate in the dark, with their clicks hitting upwards of 230 decibels. Livyatan carried an even larger spermaceti organ and skull, meaning its echolocation was likely even more powerful. These massive clicks may have allowed it to track prey over greater distances, communicate with others of its kind, and possibly even stun or outright kill prey with powerful sound waves. Then it would strike. It would dig its teeth into the mark and tear through flesh and bone to take it down. But here's the thing, if you want to bite into something big, you have to have a big set of teeth. It makes sense. And the Livyatan did. While modern sperm whales only have a set of bottom teeth, the Livyatan had 2 sets of interlocked conical teeth on the top and the bottom, perfect for hunting. During this time, Livyatan grew so huge because the oceans were full of these baleen whales who just kept getting bigger and bigger. Scientists have found fossils showing the Livyatan had evolved to have 36 centimeter long and 12 centimeter wide teeth, the biggest any animal has ever had. Not only that, fossils also show it had a skull 3 meters in length, massive, even by sperm whale standards. Long story short, the Livyatan had a mouth, head and teeth that were just ridiculously large to stay in the race with baleen whales. So why did it die out, despite its massive bite? During the early Paleocene, around 5.3 million years ago, the water cooled, which had a massive impact. These climate shifts dramatically changed the ecosystem, causing zooplankton populations to surge. This boom had a ripple effect, allowing baleen whales, key prey for the Livyatan, to thrive. As a result, baleen whales grew to unprecedented sizes, making them much harder to hunt. It just couldn't keep up. Killer whales also started to emerge. Thus started the downfall and eventual extinction of the Livyatan. But if we hop back on land, we'll find a similar story with a dinosaur that roamed the Earth back in the late Cretaceous period. 70 million years ago, being able to scrounge for food could be make or break for a species' chance of survival. When the Therizinosaurus first came to the scene, it had small, thin claws at the end of its hands. These claws weren't much good in combat, but they let the Therizinosaurus strip bark from trees and dig up the ground to find food. As time went on, the Therizinosaurus's claws grew longer and longer as it continued to make space for itself as a keen forager. You might expect the claws to grow to a decent size, but Mother Nature, just like every other creature in this video, went too far. By the end of its evolution, the Therizinosaurus had claws that were half a meter long. That's more than double the 20cm record of the giant armadillo today. These bulky dinosaurs were effectively walking around with a bunch of spears hanging from their hands. Scientists believe the absurdly long claws might have been used to hook onto tall tree branches and pull them down to snack on, but that doesn't stop the fact that the Therizinosaurus was far too specialised in one area for its own good. Recent biomechanical studies have shown that its elongated claws were surprisingly weak. They were not well suited for withstanding the high stresses of digging or fighting. They would have been prone to damage if used to rip into hard substrates or armour. Any change to its environment and those long brittle claws would be useless. The Therizinosaurus never had the chance to find out if it could adapt in time to a change in the climate though. When the asteroid hit at the end of the Cretaceous, it went extinct pretty much overnight. But even without the asteroid impact, the traits that made the Therizinosaurus so distinctive could have sown the seeds for its own extinction. Its massive claws, slow-moving frame, and reliance on specific plant resources meant it was finely tuned to a narrow ecological role. But in the long run, such extreme specialization is risky. Shifts in climate, the spread of new plant species, or the rise of a faster, more adaptable herbivore could have steadily eroded its advantage. What began as a successful evolutionary experiment might have become a dead end, its unique build leaving it unable to compete or adapt as its once stable environment changed around it.